service-based business, you may have never had an opportunity to really kind of place a dollar value on onboarding. Most of us simply treat it as part of doing business, right? We create the folders, we make the copies, we send the emails, we schedule the meetings, and then we follow up for any kind of missing information. But when we calculate the actual value of that time, the picture changes. Even a modest onboarding workload can quietly consume several $100s in your time a year. Today, I'm going to show you how to recover much of that time using a $0 system that can feel well organized, polished, and enterprise level to your clients, okay? And that is what's super important for you. Now, if you haven't done so already, I would love for you to do me a quick favor. If this episode helped you see your business differently, tap the like button, okay? That is such a small action, but it helps more business owners find practical information like this, okay? Subscribe to the podcast so future episodes can come directly to you, and subscribe on YouTube if you want the behind the scene demonstration templates and business building resources that I usually leave via link inside of the description of the show notes. So, all right, let's get into it, okay? Let's get into it. So here's what I want you to walk away with today. First, you will be able to calculate the hidden costs of manual onboarding instead of simply saying, oh my God, it takes too much time, all right? Then we will move from the problem to the bill. I will show you how one form can trigger an entire workflow, how folders and documents can be created consistently, how each client can appear on a visual project board, and how a welcome message can go out immediately. Now, most importantly, we will talk about testing the system before you trust it with more clients. The goal is not automation for its own sake, right? The goal really is a smoother experience for you and your clients. Now, if you haven't done so already, I do encourage you to grab a pen or a pencil, some paper. Obviously, this is on YouTube. It's also over on my podcast, so you have the opportunity to come back more than once and listen to the information. But I want you to really take notes, okay? Usually what I tell anyone that I'm working with is the first thing I want you to do is just to listen. Don't do anything but listen. The second time, I want you to take notes, okay? And then the third time that you listen to it, I want you to figure out what do you need to do to implement. So every single time you're listening to one of my videos, I'm going to instruct you to listen to the video at least 3 separate times, and preferably not one the same day. The first time you're listening, you're not writing anything down. The second time you're listening, you're writing it down as you're going through the information. And the third time you're listening, writing it down, and looking at how to implement. So as we continue, right, we're going to begin this segment. And this is segment 1 of 5. And we're going to talk about the cost of manual churn, okay? And this is, what it takes for you to manually onboard each and every one of your clients. Now, before we build a better system, we really kind of need to recognize what is the real problem, right? You may be saying, well, what's the problem? Manual onboarding really rarely feels expensive because the work itself arrives in very small pieces. It could be a few minutes here, an email there, then one folder to create over here. But those small actions repeat for every client. And repetition is where the hidden costs begin. Look at these 9 actions, okay, if you will. Notice something important. None of them is unreasonable. Of course, you need the client contact information. Of course, you need a folder. You need a proposal. You need a welcome email. You need a questionnaire. You need a schedule, right? So you got to send a link. And then you have to have some kind of a task card. The problem is that you are rebuilding the same operating environment from scratch for every new client. Each step also creates another opportunity to forget something, use the wrong version, or wait for information that should have been collected at the very beginning. Now ask yourself, how many of these 9 actions are you still doing? Now, this is, of course, manually. That number is a good starting point for deciding Well, what do I need to automate first? So I'm going to give you a few seconds to just look at this list. If this is your first time listening to this video, then just look at it, take a mental note. If this is your second time listening to this video, write it down, whether it's 1, 5, or 6. But what do you find yourself repetitively doing? All right. If this is your third time looking at this, then you should have already written down the areas that you find yourself repeatedly doing over and over again in your onboarding process. Now it's time for you to think about, well, what are the very first actions or tasks I'm looking to automate? Let's talk about what it is costing. All right. And this is, really a very modest per hour amount. Okay. But we're going to use $75 as our, our starting point. Okay. So when we think about it, we may take 1 hour, and it doesn't sound significant when we just say it like that. But 1 hour per client adds up very quickly. And if your time is worth a very conservative $75 per hour, and you onboard 8 clients a month, that is 8 hours of repetitive work or $600 in time value every month. Now let's look at that across the year. That becomes $7,200 if the business grows to, let's say, 20 clients a month. Onboarding consumes 20 hours and it repeats at $1,500 per month or $18,000 annually. This is not always cash leaving your bank account. I do want to say that. But it is an opportunity cost, time you have or could have spent really serving clients, generating revenue, improving your offer, or simply protecting your energy, right? Because you do need time to decompress. So what do we do with that, right? I want you to kind of, before we move forward, I want you to kind of look at this formula. And here's the formula I want you to remember. Onboarding costs equals the time spent per client multiplied by the number of clients multiplied by the value of your time. There's also a second cost that is harder to measure: correcting mistakes. A misspelled name, a wrong email address, outdated templates, missing attachment, duplicated folders, or simply just forgetting tasks may only take a few minutes to fix, but the client may experience that mistake as a lack of preparation. Okay. And so with that, the true cost is not just correction time. It is the small dent in confidence that occurs whenever that engagement whenever that engagement fully begins. And so we do not want to have the potential to repeatedly encounter any of those errors, right? The mental cost. Now we looked at the financial cost. That is measurable. But the mental cost is often what limits growth. When the process lives in your memory, your brain becomes the project manager. You carry questions like, well, did I send the agreement? Did they return the questionnaire? Which welcome package did I attach? Those are open loops and they do not disappear when you close the laptops. So over time, that constant switching weakens our focus and it can make you believe you are already at capacity. Can you imagine, right? So we're talking about this because when you have a good system, it does more than just save your time. It does more than save you a minute or hour here. It really removes that routine decision from your mind so you can give your attention to the work that actually requires you. Let's talk about the myth. So here's the myth I want to challenge. Expensive software does not automatically create a professional client experience. Okay? Clients do not experience your software subscription. They experience your process. So if you spend $300 per month on a platform, that cannot rescue any kind of confusion in instructions, any kind of delayed response, any kind of inconsistent folders or manual copying. At the same time, a carefully designed process using free tools can highly increase your professionalism because it's clear, it's fast, it's consistent, and it's personal. Now, I'm not saying paid software is bad. Actually, a lot of paid software is really good. But see, what we do here at the Biz Strategy Studio is that we like to talk to those up and coming entrepreneurs who are really looking for ways to save costs, yet still play in the big leagues. Okay. So what I'm saying is that we should buy, you know, own the software when it makes sense. And that's really after you can measure the need for it. So I'm saying we should buy complexity only after the business has a measured need for it. Right now, you really could get away with a very clear, concise, simple system that you can automate. This is where the $0 tech stack comes into play. Okay. What you see on the screen right now is my $0 stack in one view. The form captured, the client's information, which you need. The spreadsheet becomes the central record, right? It drives because the project hub, your drive, whatever it is, your app script moves the data and performs the repetitive action. Trello gives you a visual board so that you can see very easily where and how things are moving. Gmail handles your communication. Calendly handles your kickoff schedule. All of them you can get for free, and we're going to talk about them. Okay. Now, the governing principle is simple. Capture once, use many times. The client should not have to provide the same information repetitively. And you should not have to retype it in several systems. This specific tools are examples. Now, they're not endorsement. No one's paying me to say this. They are free plans, right? They do have, higher levels, as most plans will. But the same logic can be recreated with other forms, with storage boards, with emails and scheduling tools. Okay. As a matter of fact, if you have Gmail, Google now has a scheduling tool inside of its calendar functions. So even though I said calendarly here, that does not mean that that is the only tool that you are utilizing, that you have to utilize. Okay. So if you're finding value in this so far, go ahead and give me a thumbs up. Absolutely. Go ahead and just type inside the chat. Yes, I can see how this has value, and that's a lot of words. But just let me know you're here. Okay. So let us continue. We're going to segment 2 of 5. All right. So now we're going to be moving from automation matters to, well, how do we begin? Right. Now, every automation is going to need a trigger. And as you can imagine, we're using it in the same context where a trigger is simply the event that tells the system to start working. Now, in this example, the trigger is going to be a completed intake form. So the moment the client submitted, the system has permission to begin the next step. What we see here is a very strong automation, right? When you have a very strong automation, most of the time it's going to begin with a very strong intake form. The rule is very simple. Only collect information that drives an action or supports some type of delivery. Now, the legal business name can feed the agreement and the invoice. So you need that. You need a primary contact name, right? That can be personalized for your emails whenever you begin to send them. The type purchase can determine which template and folders are created. So use control options such as drop down instead of allowing anyone to do open text. The desired start date can flag urgent projects. Communication preference helps set expectation while the project objectives and file links prepare you for your kickoff. Now make the email field required and validated because nearly every downstream action is going to depend on it. And do not use a basic free form to collect medical, financial, government control, or any other kind of sensitive information without the appropriate security control. Okay, now everything we mentioned prior to medical, financial, or governmental, you can use a free form. But if you have to collect any kind of sensitive information, then you may have to pay for some type of secure form intake. And that's a little bit different, than what we're talking about here, but that is way better for your business, okay? Because utilizing those free forms could put you at risk, and we absolutely don't want that to happen. So any kind of medical, any kind of, just like it says here, any kind of medical or anything dealing with finances, right? Government, any of those items, definitely make certain that you are using proper security control. Okay, want to stress that. So the next thing, before touching the technology, map the workflow on paper. Every automation can be reduced to 4 parts: your trigger, your condition, your action, and your exceptions. Okay. Now, for example, like we have here, if a new form is submitted and the contract status is signed, then create the folder, copy the documents, create the project card, send the welcome email, all of that. Okay. And you can see that in the action. Let me change this to red, right? And you can see that here in the action. Here in the action, right? So you want to create all of that. Now, for example, if a new form is submitted and all of those things are done, then now you have a good system, right? You want to basically flag the record, notify the owner. Let me erase this really quickly. This honey, that red is not okay. That exception, is what turns a clever automation, if you will, into a dependable business process. And write at least one trigger condition action exception statement for your own onboarding process before you build anything. Okay. And it really just helps kind of make certain that the checks and balances are in there. And in the exception, if email is blank, invalid, flag row, notify the owner. Okay. That's important because anytime they're leaving any kind of information blank in that particular form, because we already talked about how we only ask for things that is going to be necessary for later type of actions, then it becomes very important that you make certain that those triggers are in place. So any kind of exception will create another action on your behalf. Okay. So now we move from collecting information to really creating a consistent client hub. So the number folder structure matters because it gives every engagement the same shape. So when we're looking at this, we have the admin and contract holds the signed agreements. The client intake, holds the submitted information. The project plan holds the scope and the timeline. The working file is your internal workspace. The client delivery contains what the client needs to see. Approvals and feedback keeps decisions organized. Invoice support, billing, and closeout holds the final recap. So the numeric preference keeps folders in the same order every single time, right? I call it the naming convention, right? This is going to really be your naming standard. The client name, the service, start, what year it started. And also it makes it searching for it a lot easier and gives the automation a predictable format to create. Okay, so that's super important. And here is just an example of what a naming convention will look like, right? So we have the client's name, we have the service, and then of course we have the year that it started or was created. And we like that simplicity. So let's talk about segment 3 of 5. So we have mapped the workflow, we standardized the client hub. Now we are ready for segment 3, which is the automated project environment. Okay, so before you do anything with any of the tools, like we talked about, you want to put some things on paper. You want to kind of write out the vision of this process. So this is where the strategy becomes an actual build. So one client submission will move through the system and create the pieces you previously built by hand, which is what we want. We want to replace the manual onboarding process with a fully professional automated system. How do we do this? Now, picture, this is a chain reaction. The client submits the form, the spreadsheet logs the data and timestamps the record. That events wake up the script, which reads the new row and begin the approval actions. Now the script creates the actual folder structures, copies the correct document templates, it creates the project board card, and send the personalized welcome email. The entire sequence can happen in seconds instead of hours. Do you see how valuable this could be? So 2 safeguards matter here. So never edit the master template. Do not do that in terms of editing it directly. You always want to copy the master and then edit only the new client's version. Also, keep passwords, tokens, any kind of API credentials in a very secure script property, never in a spreadsheet cell or shared code, okay? So you want to make sure that you are maintaining the security of your assets for building your automation. Automation does not mean giving up oversight. Someone still has to validate, that everything is moving properly. Sometimes sequences and things mess up. So you need to be able to identify when and if that happens, and then be, of course, able to correct it. So the spreadsheet becomes your source of truth because one row tells you where the client onboarding stands. Now the status is going to show whether the submission was received, whether it was built, it was sent, or whether it was blocked. And the folder and project card link takes you directly to the work. Now the welcome email date proves communication has occurred at some point. And then of course the kickoff date controls whether reminders should continue. The exception status and automation notes tell you when something needs attention. Just like we looked at previously, if something was missing from the intake form, that's a very big indication that we need to perform some type of action. So use conditional formatting so exceptions stand out immediately. Now the spreadsheet is not, doing every job. It's telling you where, job stands, where it stands in this particular client's case. Okay, just like it states here. We're moving on. Okay, I told you this is going to be about a 30-minute video. You have the opportunity to look at it again. I am going to have resources inside of the show notes and the description that you can download to help you work on this. and also provide you with some of those free tools that I talked to you about. So segment 4 focuses on a part of the client's actual experience, okay? And that's going to be the visual welcome sequence. Now, the goal is not for the client to admire your automation, even though they should. The goal is for the client to think this company is really prepared and I know exactly what happens next. Good, right? And that's what good automation should do. It should feel like thoughtful service, not like a robot sends a generic message. And so we're going to talk about that. Now, I also have other email training on my YouTube channel that talks about, how to personalize emails. So definitely go look through and find those. Okay. So the immediate welcome email should do 5 things. 1, it should thank the client and confirms the engagement. It should name whatever the service or project, so the message feels specific. It should explain exactly what happens next. It should provide one clear kickoff scheduling link, just one, and then tell the client what to prepare for so the kickoff can be productive. Now, the timeline on the right extends that experience. Okay, so the welcome email goes out immediately. A reminder can go out after about 24 hours, but only if the client has not scheduled. 2 days before kickoff, send the preparation checklist. At the kickoff, send a recap, responsibility, any kind of project club link. And then 1 week later, check in on the experience, okay? Now, the condition matters. Once kickoff is booked, the reminder emails, automation without condition, quickly becomes automation annoyance. All right, so we want to be very careful about that. This brings us to segment 5 or 5, right? So now we are in segment 5. So we're talking about scaling and stress testing. So automation does not eliminate management. Like I mentioned, it changes what you manage. Instead of personally completing every repetitive task, you manage the rules, you manage the exceptions, the security, and the performance of the system. That is a better use of your attention, but it still requires discipline. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about that. Now, before you increase client volume, I always recommend try the system. Okay, try to break the system on purpose. Run 5 test cases, a purpose submission, a missing optional field, an urgent start date, a different service type, and any kind of duplicate submissions, okay? Those are really good ways to test the system. It should produce particular results, okay? Each case is going to prove something different. The duplicate test, for example, make sure one client cannot accidentally receive 2 welcome emails or generate 2 project hubs. All right, so you want to design for failure by recording the date, the role, and steps that fail. And then alert the owner automations and never let the system fail silently. Add a unique project ID and check whether it has already been processed before creating anything. Mark it complete only after success. And in plain language, run the same request twice to not create 2 of everything. Okay. And then finally, review the free plan usage, the monthly, and then of course upgrade only when an actual limit justifies the cost. I hope you are, if you're in your 3rd or 2nd time watching the video, please, if you haven't done so already, go to the descriptions. Inside the description, there is links there that will allow for you to download resources to help you implement. Okay, it's super important to have those resources because you can print them out and you can utilize them as you're building out your system. Okay. Right now, your competitive advantage is not simply that the technology costs $0. Your advantage is that the results which are going to be faster responses, fewer errors, a consistent client experience, protected mental energy, and more profit retained in the business because you are using that time on sales. And of course, marketing. Now, do not try to automate everything this weekend or this week. Choose one repeated onboarding action and measure how long that task is. Write its triggers, conditions, action, exceptions, and then automate and test that one step. A small system that works is more valuable than a giant system that never gets finished. Okay, so start small and build, right? That's where I mentioned, in the second viewing of this video, you're writing things down that you repetitively do. And then in the third, you're identifying where you want to start. And you don't have to start at all 9 tasks. Maybe you want to just start at one of the tasks, but you really need that one task automated. Let us continue. Okay. If you want to build an audience around systems and practical business strategies like this, I created a free guide called How to Build Your Email List to 1K in 90 days. Okay. It is the same system thinking approach that we have talked about here. Okay. The same thing is going to apply to how you grow your audience, right? Turning attention into a repeatable process instead of relying on random postings. Okay. So we're going to use the link in my not my bio, but inside the description, and you're going to just download it. It's available to you at no cost. Okay. And lastly, I just want to say thank you for listening. If there's one sentence I want you to remember, it is this: build a system before you buy more system. Okay. If this episode gave you a useful next step, like it and subscribe to the podcast and the YouTube channel. You can also grab the free email list guide through the link in my bio. I am Jay Hills, and I will see you in the next episode of the Biz Strategy Studio. You guys have a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful remaining of your day. Bye.